Hello, hello, hello. Just getting set up here. It's the first time I use the event thing, and I'm trying to get it to connect with my live stream. All right. Hey, Spuddy. How's it going? Are you able to see anything on the stream yet? Are you able to see any of my photos? So I'm just testing stuff out here. I'm not really. It's my first time using this, so I'm not really sure how to get it going. I did a live stream 3 times already, but not through an event. Oh, there we go. Uh, so you can't see anything yet. I'm just in my live stream area, and I'm seeing exactly what's on my screen. Do you want to just try refreshing that, Spuddy, and seeing if anything changed for you? So what do you see on your screen now, Spuddy? Okay, that seems to be working. And is the quality of the screen, is it clear or does it look pretty rough? Oh, great. I guess the preview just looks kind of rough for me, but it's good that you can see it in good quality. And is the music overpowering my voice, or can you hear it at all? Dun, dun. Okay, I'm going to turn it up a little bit, and just let me know if it gets too loud. The last time I did this, it was totally overpowering my voice, but I don't hear it the same way that you do, so I'm not really sure. Are you able to hear it now? Tad less loud. No problem. Oops. Okay. Looks good. All right, let's get started. So, you are watching Impossible Color, and this is a continuation of my live edit series. And today, I'm going to be editing this portrait of a toddler on the beach. I thought this was kind of a cute, almost like a copper tone moment with the sitting on the buckets with the little skirt going up. So clearly there's a lot of issues with this image, and I think it makes for a good contender for editing. So first thing I'm going to do is put my camera profile to neutral and have a look around and see what kind of things I want to work on. I can see clearly that the horizon is very crooked. I was actually lying down. Hey, Adzi, whoever you say it. Thanks for joining Impossible Color. So I was actually lying down in the beach here in the rocks, so it's kind of hard for me to see the horizon. But using this tool up here, the Straighten tool, you can just click and drag a point along and get your image nice and straight. But the problem that that creates for this image is that hand gets cut off, and I'm not too happy with that. So I'm going to find something that's fairly level, but something that I can work with. Potato. Okay. I don't like how this bucket is working on the edge there, but I'm going to do some cropping later on in Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how to add more detail to the side of the image here that's going to give that arm a little bit of breathing room. But while we're in Camera Raw, let's jump right into some other settings. I'm going to use the white balance tool here and click on some area of the image that I know is white or gray and see if I can get a white balance adjustment. And then I'm just going to tweak it exactly how I want it. If you use a little gray card, you can buy those for like even like a couple bucks on eBay or Amazon. Just keep it in your bag and you can take a photo ahead of time and use that for using your white balance tool. For example, I could have just held that card out in front of the child for one shot and then adjusted the settings for all my photos in that same scene. That looks pretty good for a start. Can always come back and edit that later. And first thing I do with the exposure is always the whites. You can see the red marks on there coming in. That's just my indicators that let me know when things are pure white. You want to avoid that if you can. So I'm actually going to keep my whites up there so it's nice and bright. But then I'm going to go to the highlights and bring those down to get the extremes out of there. And then I'm going to jump into my shadows, and you can, if I went to the extreme, you can really see all the details coming out in the dark areas of the image. But I don't want to lose all the contrast, so I'm going to bring the blacks down. And it's kind of a little dance that you do with the exposure settings here to get that optimal look. I wouldn't just jump into exposure because even the slightest little bit of that can throw things really out of whack. And you just don't have the control because it's handling the entire image. And now for the clarity. I do want to add some more local contrast. That's kind of another way of describing clarity. It's the contrast between different tones that are next to each other. Going to crank that up a little bit. Kids' skin is so soft and smooth that you can afford to go a little higher in clarity without having any issues, but if you with adults it may cause some problems. And I usually actually go in the negative slightly for women. I'm going to ignore vibrance and saturation because I'll be handling those later on. You hear the music in both, but the voice only in left. I'll have a look at that Fat Space Panda in the next video. It's possible that I set one to stereo and the other one I didn't. I used to do my sharpening and noise reduction in Adobe Camera Raw, but now I do it usually later on as a final stage in Photoshop. And anyone out there that's using Lightroom, it's Adobe Camera Raw is the exact same thing. The interface looks a little bit differently, and but all the functionality is the exact same. So if you have Photoshop, you get this for free. You just have to download the module for it and make sure you get the right one for the version of Photoshop that you have. Well, I hope your right ear is your good one, Adzi. But I will play around with the HSL tab in here. So let's start things off with the red. I like having the background, the sky and the water slightly on the aqua side. Just creates a nice complement to the reds and pinks that are in the image. I really don't like how the red lines in the dress are clashing with the pink buckets. But I think in Photoshop I'll try to isolate that and either bring the buckets closer to the lines or the lines closer to the buckets. We'll sort that out as we go along. Now for the saturation. There's not a lot of green in the image, but you can see a little bit coming through the rocks at the bottom. The background is pretty dull, so I added a little bit on the aquas. And likewise for the blues. And now on to the luminance. So you can see if I turn down the luminance for red, everything in the red channel gets darker. If I crank it up, everything gets lighter. I would say about 90% of the time the skin looks better when you add a little bit of luminance to the red. It seems to hide a lot of red patches and imperfections in the skin. You can see when I brighten up the orange, which is kind of the majority of the skin color is in the orange spectrum. You can see that really opening up. But whenever you adjust a luminance value that's pretty dramatic, you always want to zoom in closely and make sure nothing funky is going on, because sometimes you'll be working later on in Photoshop and realize that you made a big mistake and it's a real pain to go back. You always want to look at the relationship between your reds and your oranges and your yellows, because they're always near each other in the skin. And if you have any portraits that are taken somewhere near some foliage, then you're going to get a green reflection that's hitting the skin. So you want to make sure that the greens aren't too out of whack with the reds. By turning up the yellows a little bit here, I think it creates a nice little glow on the edge of the arm. Just going to go back to my blacks. It looks like I'm just a little bit too dark and I'm getting blacked out here. You can see the blue indicators if I turn that on and off. I don't know if you can see that blinking in on your screen. So let's jump back into luminance. Normally I darken the background. In this case I want to lighten it because there's no way I can get that darker than the child and have it look believable. So I'm going to add my contrast by lightening it. But there's still plenty of detail, even though it's light back here. It's not turning to white. There's still something that you can appreciate in the sky and the water. So we're getting pretty close here. Let's do our lens profile corrections. I'll have a look at that Spuddy, see what's going on here. So, audio input capture. This is my microphone. Let's put that. Let's check the settings for audio. So that one's on stereo. Test, test, test. Not sure if does that change anything for you? Let's try mono. Let me turn this one off. Go back. Yeah, I'd have to stop the program to do that, but I can try that for the next one. You hear me? You hear me with reverb now. There's a slight delay in what I'm doing and what you see, so I assume you were saying that when I had both audio input capture 1 and the mic auxiliary on. But yeah, I'll put it on mono for the next one. Maybe I'll do another one possibly tomorrow or later on in the week. So for the lens corrections, really hardly any change there. I'm going to zoom in and see if we've got some chromatic aberration issues. You can always find those on the edges of things. It's got little bits of green popping through here. It's so subtle that you might not even want to mess with it, but let's just have a quick look. I don't have any other green in the image, just a few little spots in the rock, so it is pretty safe to play around with this. But you need to be really careful if you have too much green, like leaves or trees or something in there. It can cause a lot of problems. Yeah, you can see the purple's causing some issues because there's quite a bit in the edges of these buckets. So whenever you adjust your defringe, please make sure you zoom around your image and just make sure it's not hurting anything. Alright, so now I'm going to save a snapshot of that in case we ever want to come back in here and see what those changes were. It's kind of like a little save or a history for your image. We'll call that final. And if I wanted to see the camera raw defaults again, I can just go in there and then click final or whatever you had saved it to go back. And now I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. Okay, the first thing that's bothering me is there's not enough room to the side here. Whenever your subject reaches the edge of the frame and it's just touching or barely touching, it creates a point of tension. So you need to have some breathing room there, just like in graphic design where it's good practice to have some white space in your margins. And if you don't, then have that arm clearly coming off and make it obvious, but that in between doesn't look good. So I'm going to duplicate that layer and go to the background, and I'm actually going to increase the canvas size. Just gives us something to work with here. We'll add 100 pixels or so. And now in that area, I'm going to go edit and fill. And if you drop down, you'll probably be up here somewhere. Drop down to content aware. And what it's going to do, it's going to try to fill that with information that's nearby that seems to make sense. So, I mean, even the first shot there, it looks pretty natural. We do have some repeating shapes and a little bit of a line happening here. But let's just do that again with a little bit of a feather. That's pretty good. Enough that we can work with. Oh, and actually that issue wasn't so much my content aware, it was the layer that I copied above it that was the issue, so I think that first one actually would have been fine. Now I seem to be getting there's an issue with my my pen right now, so I just have to go into services and reset my Wacom tablet. If you do have a Cintiq or a Wacom tablet or anything and you suddenly find that your pen stops working, you can just type in services, load this up, and type in Wacom and stop it. And then once that finishes, start it up again. And most of the time this fixes it. I'm praying that this time it's going to be one of those cases. And it fixed it. Very good. Okay, so I'm going to go to this tool right here, the Spot Healing Brush tool. And we're just going to patch up some of these areas. See, we got some repeating shapes with these rocks. It's making this fill look pretty obvious. That one's really stubborn, so what I'm going to do is select that and go to the patch tool. There's lots of ways you can do this. You can also use the clone stamp tool, but I'm getting an awful delay because of the video. It's not selecting that for me. There we go. Are you back, Spuddy? You said you lost the stream? And the top actually looks pretty good. Still looks believable. Maybe just get that little bit of that line out of there. If you ever have a tool and you want to do the opposite effect of that tool, you can hit Alt, or having different options for the tool. Like for example, the zoom tool, you hit Alt and it can zoom out. So just in case you missed that, Spuddy, I was down here in the rocks and I was just touching up little areas like this using the patch tool. If I wanted to, I could also be using the clone stamp tool and using Alt to select an area and fill it in. I think there's enough variation in here that it seems pretty believable. So now our dimensions of the image are off because we added that extra space to the right, and that's why I had the second image on the top there. So I'm just going to drag that to the edge of the image, do a selection on it, and I'm going to just use that as my crop line. And the nice thing about this crop is it didn't leave a little sliver of water in the background there. It has a nice clean edge going to there. So now I'm going to have a look at my colors. By clicking on this little guy here, I can do a layer adjustment. And I'm going to start off with color balance. Kind of gives an overall color feeling to your shadows, neutrals, and lights. Gonna add some red to my shadows. Slight bit of magenta. And some blues. The midtones, I'm adding some cyan. A little bit of green. Staying pretty neutral on the yellow-blue scale. And now for the highlights. Really like the warmth that comes through with this yellow. So I'm going to put that up quite a bit. Usually whatever I feel it should be, I take it down just a notch because I find that later on I went too far. So here's the change that happens with the color. Now let's check out the individual colors by making another layer adjustment. And this time going to Selective Color. We'll start off with our reds. This is really kind of a thing that you need to learn to feel out. It's not, I'm not going to stay here and say, you know, this is the way to do it. You got your own personal style, and really just having a good look at your image and moving those sliders without trying to be too mechanical about it. So you notice in each of the color, the last value is black, and basically that's just kind of like the luminance to darken or lighten that color channel. I often jump right down to black just to see what's going to be affected before I start changing things. Sometimes you're just wasting time if it's not even in the image. So it looks like the cyan is mostly this strap down here and some of the sky. So true, Spuddy. He says, sometimes I go overboard, then I take a 10-minute break and come back with a new eye. Yeah, it's also good to have somebody around checking your photo for you. You definitely get lost in it, and your contrast is based on what you've been looking at for the last while. I find these buckets look a little bit more supported now. They're kind of floating with, seem too light. And I'm moving those magentas a lot further towards the lines in the dress. I mentioned before that I would probably be heading in that direction, and it creates a lot more unity in the image. Whenever you have colors that are similar but not quite the same, it's really distracting for the eye, and it creates a clashing effect. You know, if you were to wear a pinky red shirt with a orangey red pants or something, it just really bothers the eyes. So it's the same thing in photos. Any way that you can add unity or take something out that doesn't need to be there helps a lot. If it doesn't contribute to the story, I say get rid of it. So these last three whites, neutrals, and blacks, you'll notice that it seems awfully similar to shadows, midtones, and highlights. And it is, but sometimes when you get into changing each of your individual colors, you may stray from what your original intentions were. So this is kind of a final sanity check to see if you're still in line. Usually at this stage, I don't see many changes. And if they are, they're, you know, one or two off from the center. Okay, now let's have a look at what our colors did with the selective color. You can really see the difference that creates. Instead of having those pink buckets, kind of the pinky magenta buckets being the dominant feature in the story, and now you unify the child with the buckets, and I think that looks a lot better. I'm going to select both of those layers, and then I'm going to go to this little drop down here and go to new group from layers, and we're going to name that color. So now both of my color adjustments, one color balance, the other selective color, are in a group now. And if you don't use groups right now, I highly encourage you get used to them, because they can make your document look a lot cleaner. Not even with photography, but if you're you know, doing a lot of digital painting or something, they're really a godsend. So I think we got a pretty drastic improvement. I see one area that I don't like. Looks like we're getting a little bit too light in some of the sky here. But overall, I think the colors look way more united, more complementary to one another. So let's have a look at my cyan and see if that's, oops, wrong one. Go to the cyan and see if I went to much. No, that one wasn't it. So maybe it was the blue that caused some issues there. No, it wasn't the blue in the sky. But I actually think with the cyan I can correct that by actually just increasing the black a little bit there. Adds just a little bit more to the sky. A slight bit of variation in the clouds. And if I want to be more precise, I can actually make a duplicate of this. Actually, I'll make a fresh one from start. And we'll go to the cyans and darken that up. Go to the blues. We'll darken that up. Darken the neutrals. Maybe I'll leave the whites where they are. And darken the greens a little bit. Now if you click, whenever you make an adjustment layer, you automatically get this little box to the right of it, and that's your mask. And if you paint black anywhere in there, it's going to hide it, and you paint white, it's going to show up. So basically I'm going to fill that whole thing black with Shift F5, brings up your fill menu. Or you can use Edit Fill up here. And we're going to fill that black. So it has no effect right now. Then I'm just going to grab my paintbrush, set it to white. And I'm just going to paint white in those areas up here. Give a little bit more detail into the sky. I'm going to try it out in the water here, see if that adds anything too. Maybe a little bit too much for the water. But that's easy to fix. Simply switch your brush to black and it gets rid of it. So, a little bit more detail in the sky. I like it. Color on and off. I'm going to turn the whole thing down slightly. And that's all I want to do to the color for this image. So now I'm actually going to just select the whole screen by going Control A. And then I'm going to go to Edit Copy Merged. And Copy Merged basically says everything that you see on your screen, that's all going to be merged into a copy. And then I'll just paste that in place. Or you could do Control Shift V. And I'm going to use that for my noise reduction. So for the noise reduction, you could go to Noise, Reduce Noise. But I'm actually going to be using the free Cintiq collection from Google, and they're defined to noise reduction. You want to make sure that you move the screen indicator here to somewhere the central part of your image where your subject is. So I can see that a lot of the little dots that you can see in the skin there are removed easily with this noise reduction. So I'm going to OK that. always do a before and after. Make sure you're making some progress. And I'm going to go right back into the Nik collection, and I'm going to use their sharpening tool. If you don't have this, or you don't want to download it for free, you can very easily go to Filter, Sharpen, and use the Unsharp Mask. I know the name is deceiving, but it's actually a great tool. But I'm going to be using the Nik collection Output Sharpener. And I'm going to remove this red slider to see the before and after. You can see a lot more definition coming through with the eye and the hair. And even these lines are popping out quite a bit more. I think things might be looking a little bit too strong. I'm going to tone that back just a tad. So you can see here this is called logo contrast, and that's pretty much the equivalent of clarity that you would have in Adobe Camera Raw. So I'm going to OK that, and now we have our sharpen. Going to put that in a new group from layers and call that noise reduction and sharpen, and just double check that we made some progress there. I don't know if you can see it clearly on your screen, but it adds quite a bit of clarity on mine. But one of the issues is that the sharpen is adding sharpening to this background pier, and it really doesn't add a lot of value to the image. So what I'm going to do is go into the sharpen and add a layer mask. And I'm going to paint black in the areas where I don't want it to appear. It looks like you're working in the dark here, so if you click backslash on your keyboard, you can get this red indicator. I know when I first started working in Photoshop, I turned this on by mistake all the time, and I did no idea what it was, but it's actually a really useful tool. You don't have to be too precise with the background here, since it's so soft. So I'm just using a pretty large soft brush. If you want to change your brush size as you go, you can use the brackets. So you can use open and close brackets to enlarge or reduce the size of your brush. And then you can use spacebar to turn your cursor into a little hand, and you can move your screen around really easily. So you're going to be using the size and the spacebar the whole time whenever you're using a paintbrush. off and make sure that we got most of that covered. And now we can do it before and after by disabling it. And you can see that it improves quite a bit back there. So at this stage, I'm pretty much near the end. I'm just going to take a final look, see if there's anything that stands out here that I'm not really happy with. And there's this little tag here that's bothering me on the edge. So probably should have got rid of this before I did my sharpening pass, but I think what I'll do is I'll merge everything together, do the copy merge again, and paste that on top. And just do a quick selection of that little guy. Content aware. And there's still a little bit of writing on there, so just run it a couple times. And that gets rid of it. Oh, the pebble repetition bothers me. I can have a look at that, Spuddy, once I get rid of this tag. Yeah, I really don't like repetition myself, so definitely if that stuff starts to pop up anywhere, I want to get rid of it. There's a lot of lazy retouchers that don't look for those details. I think this one is standing out a bit too much. I assume that's the one that you're talking about, and maybe some of this. Let's see what we can do about this guy. And we'll do this at the same time. And maybe this guy too. And this does not look good. Down with you. We'll take little bits of these areas too to mix it up. And Control F for fill. We'll try the content aware, and sometimes it fails like it just did now. And let's remove that one out of there for now. And run that again. And it looks like the top ones aren't cooperating either. Oh, even worse. Okay, let's do it by hand. Start with the spot healing brush tool. And that very easily remove that. And that created some variation in there. It looks like that pattern's broken up quite a bit. This double line thing isn't working for me. Let's get rid of that. This one looks a little too sharp down there. Just trying to create some randomness to this area. And I think this big rock needs to go. That's a pretty obvious repeat. That looks good down there. No detectable patterns here. And I think that looks good to me. Let's just right up along here, see if there's anything else that started to repeat. And I think that solves it, Spuddy. Spuddy's saying clone stamp, perhaps? Yep, the clone stamp is a great tool for removing things like that as well. Some of the tools that I use most often are the spot healing brush. Sometimes the healing brush tool allows you to select an exact area that you want to heal, or sample from to heal. The patch tool is great, and also the clone stamp tool. The thing about the clone stamp tool is that you're getting an exact duplicate of an area, and that works really well when you have an area, let's say, where the leg meets the water here, and if you tried to do some kind of spot healing, it just kind of blends the two together, so you can't get a nice crisp edge. I actually have a tutorial how to remove the background on anything, and it goes through each of these tools and shows what each one is best for, but definitely there's a lot of overlap. So that's everything that I want to do for this image today. If you have any questions, I'm looking at the chat right now. I see you there, Spuddy, and are you still around, Adsy? I think while I'm just waiting for some questions there, we'll bring in the original image. But first we'll save this as, I'll say Bucket Kid. Something that frustrates me with Bridge is when you have an image open with a certain name, and then you go to open another version of it. It thinks that you want to work with the one you already have open, so you always have to save it as something else, and then try opening up your Adobe Camera Raw version again. Oh, thanks, buddy. So if we go in here, we can go to Final. But actually, we want to go to the Camera Raw defaults. That's what we started with. And make sure that we're on camera neutral, so we have a fair comparison. Control A will select everything, and then you can copy, and you can paste in place with Control Shift V. And I'm just going to try to align this up without that extra space that we added to the side, so you can see it clear before and after. So what do you think, guys? Do you think that was an improvement on this one? Anybody that's just dropped in, you're watching Impossible Color, and I've been doing these videos for probably, I don't know, maybe about 6 months or so, and just lately I've been starting to try out the live videos, and if I get enough people that are following, I'll definitely keep them going. So please share them with your friends, get people to subscribe, and then they'll get notifications when I do set up events. So Fat Space Panda asks, do you have a time set for the next stream? I don't. yet, but I'm thinking sometime tomorrow. Maybe I'll try 12 again, possibly 1 in the evening as well. We'll just see what the demand is. What was this a good time? Was 12 a good time for you guys? Did you guys get a notification when I created an event for this today? Oh, okay, so 12 my time. I'm on Pacific Standard, so on the west coast of Canada. I think anybody who's joining in from California would probably be in the same time zone. So Spuddy asks, I noticed that all your images are on the cool side for me. Perhaps your monitor is set to a warmer temperature than mine. I think that's possible, Spuddy. This particular image is a little bit cooler, I would say, but I think I've been actually accused of being on the warmer side most of the time, so I'm not sure. It could be your monitor. If you check out my Facebook page, you can just facebook.com/impossiblecolor. I do a lot of before and after images, so you can see side by side, and you may get a better sample of how warm or cool the images are there. Yeah, I'm using a Cintiq for my monitor, and then I have another Dell monitor right beside it. I kind of have a dual screen set up here now, and my Cintiq colors are extremely accurate, but when I look at things over on the Dell, it kind of takes on a slightly warmer colors, and they're not really as accurate. Like if I went to a printing press and printed something off the Cintiq with the right color profiles, it looks exactly the way I see it on screen. So that one seems pretty reliable. I'm just wondering, do you guys have a sorry, cutting out there. Do you guys have a tablet that you're working with as you edit your photos? Somebody asked, what Cintiq do you have? I've got the 21UX, so it's quite large. I did a lot of digital painting in the past, and it really helped out with that. But for years, I used a little Wacom tablet, and those work wonderfully, and they actually have some advantages over the Cintiq because you don't have to move your hand around quite as much, and you're not blocking your screen as you're working with it. But if you could afford a Cintiq, this definitely makes things easier to work with, because what you see is what you get. You're right there, your hand's in it. It's just like drawing or painting. Yeah, you can do everything with the mouse as well. Fat Space Panda, I did that for years as well. The main reason why I changed is it puts a lot more pressure on your hand, and I started to get some carpal tunnel issues because I was working on the computer all day with different businesses I was in. So Spidey's asking, or he's talking about buying a tablet, and he's got his eye on the Wacom Intuos Pro Medium. Well, I actually used the Wacom Intuos for quite a while. It's probably a lot longer than I've used my Cintiq, and it does take some time to get used to, but it's kind of like riding a bike. After you get it, it doesn't really go away. Like I could, even though I've been using the Cintiq for the last 4 or 5 years or so, I could jump right back into the tablet and it wouldn't feel awkward at all. The main thing that you need to be concerned about with the Cintiq, the tablet, is just making sure you get your settings right. I think there's something that says like mouse setting, and there's something opposite that I don't quite remember, but one of them is horrible and near impossible to use, and the other one is really easy, and it becomes intuitive after using it for 2 or 3 days. So I'm actually going to shut off my live stream now, but I'll join you in chat, and I'll be answering with text, so just stick around and I'll be happy to answer your questions there.